Hello, everybody. I'm here with Angela again for a question and answer, the weekly live stream. I guess to open it up, I'll have a few comments about this stingy stimulus that just passed. We now know from reporting by the New York Times that Joe Biden encouraged the Democrats to cave so much. They negotiated against themselves to the point where they agreed to something less than the Republicans ever offered. And of course, a one-time $600 check is not going to help that much. The unemployment surplus or supplement of $300 a week only lasts till mid-March. Studies I've seen say we need at least $100 to $200 billion in rent assistance to save people from evictions. They came up with $25 billion. But they did find some, nice little tax breaks for the upscale people for their 3 martini lunches and whatnot. So this
race horses.
Pretty pathetic, huh?
And they're race horses.
I hadn't seen that yet. I mean, it's 5,500 pages, including the COVID relief plus the omnibus spending bill. I saw they appropriated everything that the nuclear modernization program asked for plutonium warheads. So the nuclear modernization program goes forward. And then on energy, I mean, some of the climate groups are saying, oh, we got $35.2 billion for energy. Well, you break it down, and over half of it is for carbon capture and sequestration and for nuclear power. So half of it's for dirty energy. And even if the other $18 billion is for various forms of renewables and public transportation and whatnot, that's a drop in the bucket. We've been saying all along we need a full-strength Green New Deal to bring back the economy, including the Economic Bill of Rights as part of it, so everybody has a job guarantee, an income guarantee, housing, healthcare, education, and a secure retirement. And none of that is on the agenda. I think finding out what Biden did, encouraging the Democrats to compromise everything away, is an indication of what we're going to get from the Biden administration. So we just ran a campaign where a lot of so-called progressives and even self-styled socialists said, you got to support the hated Democratic liberals to defeat the Republican neo-fascists. The problem with that is neoliberalism, privatization, domestic austerity, subsidies for the rich and tax breaks, militarism abroad created the condition under which neo-fascism thrives. People are hurting, and the right mobilizes them with racist scapegoating and their weird conspiracy fantasies that provide simple explanations of complex problems. So we're in a situation where the neo-fascists can regroup, mobilize against Biden, who's not delivering relief. And so, the result of this election was Biden narrowly won the presidency, narrowly in the Electoral College. And I think I pointed out last week, if just 21,462 votes in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia had gone to Trump instead of Biden, Biden would now be the president-elect, even though he lost the popular vote by 7.1 million votes, which means obviously the Electoral College has got to go, and we need to push for ranked choice voting and a national popular vote for president. And ranked choice voting is key, because if we don't have that, it's still going to be a winner-take-all dynamic where the corporate media and the liberals who think they got to back, centrists to defeat the far right, even though the centrists create the groundwork for the far right, leaves us out of the debate. So I think that's a key thing. And, what we said during the campaign is still true. We got to defeat both the Democratic neoliberals and the Republican neo-fascists. And I think this stingy stimulus bill is just another illustration of why we got to do that. So what do you want to tell us about, Angela?
I actually took a note from you and made notes, Howie. I want to thank my hermano, Jose Perez, early this morning, sent me all 50 something 100 pages of this slog. So I was able to kind of, take a page from Howie Hawkins, like come into the discussion, actually having read some of that. I didn't make it very far. I ain't even gonna lie. But, there's money to meddle with Venezuela in there. There is, I think there are breaks for people, who have racehorses. I was like, priorities. I've been seeing that there's also funding for penalizing people, giving them jail time for illegal streaming, as if that's like the massive priority that we are in this pandemic. You should really be going after that. So I mean,
illegal streaming, or do we need a permit for what we're doing right now?
I think we're legal.
Okay.
I think we're legal. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, wow. And the comments, those of y'all that I follow on Twitter that are following me on Twitter was fire today. So, if y'all are not following, the discussions, it was Ashley Stevens that was leading one, Bree Joy leading one, and my dope people over at Hood Communist, basically. And I want to go back to this a little later on in the discussion, this idea of personal responsibility, when we are not the corporations that are polluting the planet. We are not, this shaming of people and what they're going to do with this pittance of a stimulus, like this is a handout, like it's not our money, which I'm not going to get it. I didn't get the last one. I'm probably not going to get this one. But, we need to reframe how folks are looking at that. And I want to talk, lift up the youth meeting. We had Howie and I and Dr. Margaret Flowers. We had the honor of participating in a youth organizing meeting on Saturday, which was amazingly dope. Young folks came and talked about social justice. They talked about the Green New Deal and climate change, and they talked about Medicare for all. And, we're looking at steps as far as moving forward, because as y'all know, young people are the movement. So I want to lift them up, because that was pretty amazing. Also thinking about the death penalty. And y'all know that in the last few weeks, 3 people have been executed so far, before 45. I almost said something I ain't had no business, Lord forgive me. I almost called him out his name. Forgot where I was. But before this individual leaves office, there are 5 people that are slated to die. 3 of them have been executed. The next execution that is supposed to be going forth will be Lisa Montgomery, who will have to be brought, from what I understand, from Texas to Indiana, because she's the only woman on death row. So they're not housing her at the facility in Terre Haute. They will be executing her on January 12th. And so I just want people to understand that we need to be reigniting this conversation about the death penalty in this country, and the fact that, it doesn't deter crime. It has, it is unjustly applied. And, one of the things we need to take up with this coming administration is that you are not doing this in our name. In a state as corrupt as this one, you have no moral authority to execute anyone. So that's on my mind. And then, like I said, this concept of personal responsibility, I think is something that, we can speak to at some point. So that, you asked me, that's what's on my mind. And hey, Tina. Hey, Queen.
Solidarnosc 2222. Hi, are Angela, Howie, and the Greens going to help with Force the Vote? Jimmy Dore was the only big progressive YouTubers to interview Howie and the Greens. Savage, Honkala Stein, etc. Well, I guess it may be how you define big. We got, The Hill with, what's her name? Blanking on her name. That's a pretty big podcast. But in any case, Force the Vote. I guess Jimmy Dore is trying to get the squad to
Crystal ball.
withdraw their support from Pelosi until she agrees to bring Medicare for all to the floor for a vote. And, my attitude about that is the progressives got no leverage. I mean, they can do this, but look what happened to AOC this week. She's wanted to get on Energy and Commerce Committee since she first got in there. A seat opened up with Elliot Engel vacating it because he lost his reelection. And when she put her name forward, the corporate Democrats pulled this backbencher who's not even popular with the Democrats named Kathleen Rice. She's a conservative Democrat from Long Island here in New York. And then the Steering and Policy Committee of the House Caucus, which is their leadership body, voted 46-13 Rice over AOC. And AOC wanted to be on that committee to deal with Medicare for all and the Green New Deal, her pet issues. That is basically the corporate Democrats in the House, not just Biden, telling the progressives, shut up, sit down, and, be quiet. Now, I don't think, they could even force a vote. And then the question is, so what if they did? Medicare for all would be defeated with the current House we have. And then what? So I question the timing. On the other hand, it would be good to get everybody on the record because there are a lot of people that signed off on Medicare for all who probably don't really support it. I mean, we've seen that in 4 states now where the Democratic, it's usually the Assembly or House, will vote for Medicare for all until they got the Senate and they got the governorship and they can actually pass it. And then suddenly they get cold feet. We've seen this happen in Hawaii, California, Vermont, and last year in New York. So, okay, we get them on the record and then what? My question for the people pushing this is, okay, you find out somebody's really not Medicare for all. You're going to run a Democrat against them or you're going to run independent with the Greens? Because if you want to defeat Democratic Party neoliberalism, you're not going to do it within the party of Democratic neoliberalism, Democratic Party neoliberalism. They're the world's second most enthusiastic capitalist party. And all progressives do in there is make them look better than they really are. So anyway, those are my thoughts. And, we'll see what happens. I don't know what you got anything to add, Angela?
I am supportive of what you just said about at least getting people to show themselves, because I've been seeing a lot of that, been asked about it on Twitter. Anyway, I don't know what I was just looking at. Seeing a lot about that on Twitter. And, even if, like you said, if it's a tool to get people to expose where they really stand, like a literal line in the sand on this, what are we prepared to do? And I've had people off to the side badgering me about this. And it's like, what are people going to be ready to do in the event that the people, that you are looking at as a progressive don't, move the way that you need them to? And so I think that also needs to be a part of the conversation. And that's not something I have seen people discussing. So. Hey, the last outlaws. It's been a minute. How you doing? Howie, this is for you. Good evening, Howie and Angela. I have a question. Lack of voter self-education got us here. Should Americans be holding ourselves responsible for our current elected government? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, obviously, in the end, we get the government we voted for. But the question really is for people like us. What are we going to do about it? The left in this country has not organized a grassroots mass party of the left that is in our communities where people know us and they trust us because we've got to know them. We build relationships and friendships, and they see us out there on the issues. And they come to us to talk about the issues. What we have now is a media environment. I don't care whether it's corporate media or social media. Everybody's sitting on their screen, isolated, and just, gravitating toward their own silo and getting reinforced on what they believe. And if we have local chapters of a math party where people talk to each other, hash things out, it all makes us smarter. It all makes us better speakers and writers when we got to come up with written materials. And that's the self-education that we need. It can't be done in isolation. It needs to be a collective process. And that's the function of a real political party. We don't have any political parties in this country, really. We have memberless parties. We have brands. And the party you enroll in or whose ballot you pick up at a primary is who you get to vote for in a primary. That's all that means. There is no grassroots organization of the Democratic and Republican parties. If you got an issue, you don't go to your local committee of your Democratic or Republican party to get it resolved. You usually form a single issue or ad hoc committee to, pressure the city council or the county legislature or whatever it is. There's not a place where we meet regularly and educate ourselves in a systematic way on current issues, on history, and all those things. And that's what a political party should do. And that's why we need to build one.
And I just want to interject. I know this wasn't intended for, the question wasn't intended for me, but I think that, this touches on this idea of personal responsibility. I think that, we need re-education as far as, the history of class struggle in this country, the history of the left in this country, what it means to be a political independent. And also, I think we have to understand that the reason that these things have not been prioritized in the way that they need to be is by design. Most people are so caught up in this country, particularly in the working class and cash poor, sectors of the country. We are so running like little hamsters on a wheel, trying to make ends meet and trying to keep our heads above water, which is also intentional under this capitalist system, that we lose sight of the need for these things. And like I said, it's intentional. And I think that, it speaks to this whole idea of, personal responsibility versus what this system that we live under is responsible for, how it harms us. If that makes sense to anybody.
Yeah, it does. And I would add to that, a lot of people are buying into these simplistic conspiracy fantasies. The right is rife with them, but we have a lot of that on the left. And these are not fact-based power structure analyses or fact-based analyses of policy issues and the consequences of policies. It's saying there's a cabal of people that are doing bad to us, and somehow we can just get rid of them, everything will be all right. That's not going to solve our problems. Our problems are systemic, not just because of a few bad people. And because people aren't, working together and thinking things through together, they tend to just grasp onto these simplistic conspiracy fantasies. And that's really hurting us. So we not only have a lack of self-education, we have a lot of miseducation and people latching onto, and there's a whole industries, the right-wing message machine, 24/7 right-wing talk radio and evangelical Christian radio and networks like Fox, Newsmax, and One American Network. And they got their own websites. They got a whole thing. And a lot of those people are latching. That's why we got people saying the election was stolen, COVID is a hoax, climate is a hoax. And they've just decided this is my team and I'm with it. And they just accept what they're told. We got to have a movement at the grassroots. But, we run into those people. We were talking about it last week. We had Nikita Slade on talking about some of the construction tradespeople she works with and talks to who buy into this stuff. But we're glad Nikita's there to ask people some questions and help them think through the issues. We really need that because it's not only on the right. There's a lot of that kind of simplistic thinking on the left. And So people don't understand how capitalism works, what socialism is. That gets back to what Angela said. We need to know our history. We need to understand, the basics of a analysis of the economy. There hasn't been a socialist left in this country that has done that kind of education systematically in generations. And you really have to go back to the 30s and then back into the late 19th century. The populist movement had their own version of that. We don't have that now. We have a politics where progressives think the Democrats are the lesser evil, so we better work with them. And they don't have any power in there. And certainly nobody's getting well educated in there.
And I think one of the things that I meant to bring up at the top, which is pertinent to this conversation, is how many people in this country know that this current administration put a gag order on, any entity that receives government money. And, if y'all are listening and I misspeak on that, correct me. But my understanding is that if you receive federal money, you cannot teach about implicit bias, systemic racism. In some institutions, you can't even say it. There's like a snitch line where, if you're working with say you're in a college and there's a professor teaching on this, you can snitch them out. And so one of the demands, it's my understanding that the NAACP is bringing a lawsuit to force, to fight that, but also the incoming administration is going to be challenged to rescind that order, that gag order immediately. Because like you were just saying, Howie, and the fact that we're disconnected from our history, we have a tendency in this country to not make the linkages between the root causes of what's happening and what's happening. Like, okay, you have all of this violence in certain urban areas, but not making the linkage to the fact that people have been forced into generational poverty for decades, that resources are constantly being pulled out of their communities, and all of these other factors that create that. So, this gag order is saying you're looking at these monumental problems, but you're not allowed to speak to the root causes of them. So I want y'all to think of, folks to kind of think about, if you can find it, and I'll share it if I need to pull it up. But the lawsuit that's going forward, and just being aware of the fact that this gag order exists. And yeah, so Zeke, you want to take that one, Howie?
Yeah. Do I think government should be able to require people to get vaccinated? I think mandatory vaccination will create more problems in getting people vaccinated. It'll provoke resistance. When I got the polio vaccination in the 50s, it was, an educational campaign. And being a little kid, I was going to take it with a sugar cube. So I was looking forward to that sugar cube. I mean, there are ways to get enough people vaccinated with good public education. You make it mandatory, and people they have their reasons. I mean, I saw, and I don't know if this is true, apparently there's pork fat in part of the one of the vaccines, so Muslims don't want to take it for that reason. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if that's true, but if that was true, and for them that wasn't religiously correct, to force them to take that is, I think, a violation of their First Amendment rights. So I don't want to make it mandatory, but damn, I want as many people as possible to take it.
Yeah, I was reading actually about, I think it was this morning or yesterday, about the Catholic Church is divided on the vaccine, because it's my understanding that there are, they didn't name the name brand, but the use of tissue from aborted fetuses has been used in those. So of course, where they stand on that. So it's my understand, U.S. bishops are telling folks to get vaccinated. And there's also there was the question raised. So But do I think it should be the government should be pointing their finger in people's face and telling them you have to take this? I absolutely do not think that.
Mitchell Human, hi. I was wondering what we could do to help support third-party representation. And particularly, what can someone 16 and under do to help it? You want to start with that one, Angela?
Hey, you have come to the right place. I sound like a used car salesman. Join us. If you are someone in that youth meeting that I referenced, like in my opening remarks, that's exactly who we're talking to. We've got the young eco-socialists that you can, come on in with. And I also think, I guess we'll put it in the chat at some point, the youth organizing, we have a youth organizing team. So we are definitely working with young people and want to get you involved. So you can join the Young Eco-Socialists and also with our youth organizing team. I don't know the links like out of my head, so, but yeah.
Well, in particular for someone 16 and under, talk it up. I got involved supporting the Peace and Freedom Party when I was 15 and 16. My concern was these stupid two major parties had this war in Vietnam they were going to draft me for, and I didn't have any problem with the Vietnamese. It was their country, and I learned that, we prevented an election because we didn't like who would get elected. It would have been Ho Chi Minh. So I was talking it up with my peers and also adults. I would badger them. I'd get in arguments with them. And I don't know if I always won, but it helped sharpen my skills and my arguments. So I think young people can speak up. And in general, I think we all got to push for ranked choice voting, not just for the single member seats for executive branch, but also for legislatures, city councils, state legislatures, and Congress. Because when you have ranked choice voting from a multi-member district, you get proportional representation. So if it's a 10-member district, it takes about 10% of the vote to elect one representative of your party. And if we have that, then people can vote for what they want rather than the lesser evil to stop who they fear the greatest. And that opens up the whole debate for us. Without that, we're in a difficult situation in this winner-take-all plurality winner system from single-member districts. So I would say ranked choice voting is something we should be working on. And I'll go back to that damn presidential election. Biden beat Trump by 7.1 million votes. But if 21,462 in 3 states, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, had switched their votes, Trump would be the president-elect. That's insane. We got to replace the Electoral College with a ranked choice national popular vote. And the way we're going to put that on the national agenda is by passing ranked choice voting more and more at the local level and at the state level. We're now up to 31 cities and 2 states. And I think this is an idea whose time has come that we need to get on board with and be serious organizers in that campaign. Maybe potatoes.
Hey, potatoes. Would y'all consider networking with Vermin Supreme and the Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party? I think it would be good to find common ground like ranked choice voting.
Yeah, I have no opposition to that. Where I'm at, there is no Libertarian Socialist Caucus. I have run into them. I ran into Vermin Supreme during one of the presidential debates for all third-party comers. And yeah, if we have a ranked choice voting campaign going on, we want everybody who supports it on board. And that would include Vermin Supreme and the Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party.
Deegan, what do you think the next step for the Green Party is? Organize, educate, organize, and organizing out, as Howie says it, an outward reaching way of organizing. The left tends, and it's not a swipe at the left. It is what it is. the left in this country we like to congregate in our own little circles and speak among each other. And so we're in a position now, we're going to build the left. We got to move outward, talk to people that may not know who we are, which I think was something that we saw, with this election cycle, is how many people resonate with the issues that we put forth, but don't necessarily know that the Green Party is the one that authored these things. And so getting out and meeting people, and we are very well aware of the fact that there is a global pandemic happening and that COVID is changing the landscape in the way that we organize, not just in this country, but all over the place. So, being as creative as we possibly can, but talking to people who are not necessarily, identify themselves as leftists, but, need what we're talking about and are responsive to it. Because I'm not, and I've heard people talking about, you should, it's time to make peace with Trump supporters. That's not my lane. So it's not my lane. I'm over here. So Howie, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think to do that local organizing, we got to have local party organizations. So I think the next step for all of us is to build, strengthen our local party organization, and then do that outward-looking organizing, which one phrase for it is deep canvassing, not the flyby canvassing you do right before election to find out if somebody supports you or not, and you give them a flyer and you mark them down as a supporter or not, so you can get them out to vote on election day. These are, real conversations with people. Knock on the door and tell them you're from the Green Party, and ask them, what they think we should be doing, what are their concerns, and listen. And get to know people, and then you'll find people that you can work with, and build the base systematically. This needs to be year-round, not seasonal when elections come around. And then we've got to pick issues that we hear about are on the top of people's minds, and be constructive and effective on those issues. And that's going to win people over. Even the Trump supporters that aren't in Angela's lane, a lot of those people, look, Trump was out there very energetically saying he's going to reopen the economy so people can go back to work and get their businesses back on board. And Biden was like Hillary Clinton. Remember Hillary Clinton's slogan, stronger together. And Biden's was heal the soul of the nation. And people that need jobs and want to get their businesses started are like, yeah, that's nice, but what does that do for me? And we know from the polls that about 5% of the voters decided the last week, and by I think it was about 56 to 44%, they broke toward Trump. Because at least Trump, as much of a lying demagogue as he is about his, with his economic boasts and promises, at least he was speaking to people's pain. Yeah. And, the Biden campaign, like Hillary Clinton's, it may have soothed the sensibilities of never Trump Republicans and professionals in the suburbs, but it didn't speak to a lot of people. Now, there are Trump people out there that they feel like they look at the Democrats and they see those professionals. They see the people that supervise them at work. Or if they go to court, it's the damn lawyers and judges. And they don't feel those people have their interests in mind. Whereas the Republicans, particularly Trump, at least he knows how to con those people. And they went with him. But I think some of those people are up for grabs. Now, obviously, there are a lot of hardcore racists, evangelical people that believe in, a white Christian nation. And, that is the core of the neo-fascists. But if you figure 40% of Trump's supporters are diehard like that, given the approval rating he had of 40%, he got 74 million votes. So what is that? That leaves, a few 10 million Trump people that, they were Obama voters before. They were Democratic voters before. Or they weren't voting before because they felt like nobody was listening to them. So it depends on where you live. You got to look around your community and figure out if you're going to take over this community, the Greens are going to have majority on city council and the mayor. Well, what neighborhoods are most likely to come with you? and which ones do you need to organize? And that's where you start canvassing, and you start building a mass party. Just having a little club of politically like-minded people really doesn't help that much. We want power. We want to win. We're not just posturing here. So what's the next step for the Green Party? Get serious and responsible and disciplined, and really figure out how you're going to organize in your local community.
And I shared on my social media because I was off today, and so I was able to talk big smack on social media. But one of the articles that I shared was from the wonderful local newspaper out of Southside Chicago, about 50 years of the Rainbow Coalition that was started by Fred Hampton, 1969. So, as far as looking at ways to do coalition building, that's personally something that gives me a lot of hope and inspiration. So, at a very grassroots level, reaching across these different barriers to find where we can make alliances. That made me happy.
JS236 question: what positive changes in foreign policy, if any, can be expected from the Biden administration? Well, looking at his picks, a lot of war hawks, a lot of retreads from the Clinton and Obama administrations. These are part of the national security establishment, the bipartisan, aggressive foreign policy. And I have heard nothing from Biden during the whole campaign of any positive changes in foreign policy, except, Trump was like, he was all personal for Trump. He didn't know how to interact with other leaders of other countries. So I would expect diplomacy, the State Department will get staffed again. But as far as the big policy objectives, I don't see any. And, we got, as Angela pointed out, the omnibus spending bill apparently has money for intervening in Venezuela. That is, it's fundamentally in violation of what we think we're about, democracy and self-determination. I mentioned the money for the new plutonium bombs. They're modernizing the nuclear forces, and they've triggered this new nuclear arms race around the world that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists now has their doomsday clock the closest they've ever had it to midnight. I'm kind of thinking out loud about this one. I think Biden will go to Putin and say, let's extend the New START treaty, which expires on February 6th. That's the last strategic arms treaty between the US and Russia. So they extend it and then negotiate the next round. I would say that's positive. Biden has indicated, and so has Rouhani, at least in Iran, that they can get back to the Iran nuclear deal. So I think here and there, there'll be some things improved over Trump. But in the broad picture, I don't think much is going to change.
Hey, Leo. How you doing, boo? Why are there no out Black Panthers? There actually are out Black Panthers. There's a new Black Panther party. I want to say, are they in Philadelphia, Howie?
There's a group in Newark, the New African Black Panther Party.
Yeah. So, I mean, people may not necessarily be calling themselves explicitly the Black Panthers, but I know there's small groups here and there, but there are a whole lot of organizations that adopt the things that the Panthers were putting forth, particularly Pan-Africanism, and also working for the liberation throughout the diaspora, freedom and liberation for Black Americans within these borders, and also all oppressed people and at the same time standing for ending the oppression of oppressed people all around the world. So I think there's a lot of organizations that are doing that work. In fact, I know there are.
Somebody in the chat said the new Black Panther Party is reactionary. There is a group called the New Black Panther Party. They are reactionary. The New African Black Panther Party in Newark is progressive. So there are a lot of and Angela's right. There are a lot of small parties out there or groups, trying to carry on the spirit of the original Black Panther Party, its best traditions. And I think, as Angela mentioned earlier, and certainly for me, I came up in the San Francisco Bay Area when the Panthers got started in Oakland, and they've certainly been an inspiration for me. And also some lessons learned from, I think, some of the mistakes they made. But, their basic spirit of serving the people and working. I mean, the thing they did at that time when a lot of the Black liberation movement was just going off on its own is they understood that if we're really going to change this country, we got to have a multiracial movement of the working class and the poor. And the Panthers, that was that Rainbow Coalition that Fred Hampton started in Chicago. And I think that's something that it should remain a model for us.
Okay, I got two things. One, speaking to this particular question, Jennifer, thank you for raising that. She's asking in the chat, which that went right over my head, so excellent. Do you mean out as in LGBTQ plus? And she's saying, I've spoken to Panthers, once a Panther, always a Panther, and that they acknowledge the contributions of LGBTQ plus folks in the movement. And yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I remember, Huey Newton came out clearly in support of what was then called gay liberation early on, before much of the Black left or the white left.
And Jennifer references Dr. Angela Davis, who, we all know is on the LGBTQIA rainbow, worked with the Panthers very closely. So I think traditionally the Panthers were very open. I know there's some reactionary segments around the country, but traditionally they've been very open to standing for liberation of oppressed people. And the other point is the boss has given us this in the chat. This just in, 45 is asking Congress to amend the $900 billion COVID-19 stimulus package. One of his demands is that Congress raises the stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000.
Yeah, he's running for president in 2024. The guy Panders. I mean, he's like Bill Clinton. Remember, Bill Clinton slogan was, or watchword was, "It's the economy, stupid." So he made a lot of promises, even though he got more of this neoliberal austerity done than any president in history. NAFTA, repeal of welfare, deregulation of the financial industry, deregulation of telecommunications, the crime bill. I mean, across the board. But he would say, "I feel your pain." He pandered, and I think that's what Trump is doing. I don't think Trump really that cares, and personally, but he's thinking politics. And in this case, like a broken clock that's right twice a day, he may be right on this one. Now the question is, what's McConnell going to do? I don't know.
You feel like a shuttlecock on a badminton board right about now, where we're being batted back and forth. This is ridiculous. Hey, Eric. Eric wants to know, do y'all think we are pretty much, and I'm going to just clarify this because I know y'all are reading this and going, no, it says you guys. No, I don't say you guys because I'm not a guy. So do y'all think we are pretty much headed toward a violent revolution given the breadcrumbs in this new, now up in the air stimulus bill? No, I don't.
Yeah, I think the question is, what kind of movement is going to come out of this? Are progressives, and I'm speaking not just of independent lefties like us, but also those progressives still in the Democratic Party, are they going to say we got to give Trump some slack because he's just coming in and he's got to deal with McConnell in the Senate? Or are we going to independently make our demands? And I think that's key to whether we get a progressive movement going forward. We got to pose our demands independently of party politics. You know, the Greens try to give voice to these demands, the progressive ones. But, you know, I like to use the analogy of during the anti-Vietnam War movement, we made our demands on Humphrey as well as Nixon. We didn't say Humphrey was a lesser evil. We made our demands in the primary on Kennedy and McCarthy, the supposed anti-war candidates. Our demand was out now. They were talking about negotiations. That wasn't good enough. So we made our demands on all of them. And we came out of the election, even though Nixon won, with the anti-war movement that was clear about what it wanted and kept growing until we had a near general strike with the Vietnam moratorium in October 1970. And then, was it 70 or 71? Anyway, and then massive demonstrations exactly a month later in November. And we know from the memoirs that convinced Nixon and Kissinger not to execute their so-called secret plan to end the war in Vietnam, which involved using tactical nukes. So we won, even though at the time we didn't quite know it. Then you go to that anti-Iraq war movement, and the Broad Coalition, United for Peace and Justice, their slogan was not out now, it was against the Bush agenda. In other words, vote for Kerry. And Bush won anyway, and the movement, demoralized, confused, pretty much disappeared. And, you know, I think those are examples we need to think about, in that we got to make our demands independently on all of them. And not, you know, cut slack for Biden because he's not Trump. Like I said at the top, we got to defeat Democratic neoliberalism and Republican neo-fascism. And you're not going to beat the fascists with the liberals. We need a green eco-socialism.
I had somebody really try me with like got belligerent about the fact that y'all didn't, I've been badgering you to support, put your support behind these Democratic progressives. And I was like, wait, I'm a socialist. I'm not endorsing people who support capitalism. It does not work like that. So,
well, in the last election, they gave unconditional support to a center-right neoliberal named Joe Biden. And because that support was unconditional, he owes them nothing now. That's why he's stuffing his cabinet with deficit hawks and war hawks. And on the House side, they're telling AOC she can't be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Like one person on that big committee is going to gum up the works. Well, from the corporate side, I guess they think so.
It's like Discount Chocolate made the point in the chat about the fact that, and I keep hearing, general strike, revolution. Y'all, we're going to have to face the fact that we are not ready for any of that. We're not united in the way, as far as a left that has some strength behind it, some unity, some teeth. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. The average person who is, working class and affected by this pittance that they're throwing us, a lot of people are still buying into this idea of dessert. I should be happy with whatever they're giving me because they're giving me something, and losing sight of the fact that, sweetheart, that's your money anyway. I'm sorry. And other countries have done this competently. This one has chosen not to, continues to choose not to. So, I mean, we have a whole lot of folks in our country that are contending with the low self-esteem that's been imposed on them for generations. We are not ready for a revolution. We are not ready for a general strike. We got to build that base.
Discount Chocolate. Unfortunately, we're still at a stage where we have to make the case for independent socialism in opposition to Dem entryism. Yeah, we've been at that stage since 1936, when what was a pretty strong movement for an independent labor party. It was a time when the Progressive Party had Wisconsin, the governorship and both senators. In Minnesota, Farmer Labor Party had the governorship and both senators. And between them, they had 13 members of Congress. There were independent labor candidates in office across the country, Socialist Party candidates in office across the country. And they were talking about mounting a challenge to Franklin Roosevelt, whose first New Deal was not that progressive. And just the fact of that challenge, along with the sit-down strikes and the social movements, convinced Roosevelt he had to move hard to the left. And that's when we got the Works Progress Administration, public jobs for the unemployed, the National Labor Relations Act, the Social Security Act. You know, all the things we think of progressive in the New Deal was that second New Deal. And that's because there was a threat of a third party challenging FDR. And FDR, the Democratic National Committee did a poll and they found out if that party ran, Roosevelt would lose. It wasn't clear who would win. It would be a real three-way race. But what happened was the labor movement and the communists, who were the biggest growing group on the left, went into the New Deal coalition. Meanwhile, Floyd Olson, the governor of Minnesota, who was the most likely candidate, got stomach cancer and died very quickly before the election. And another one who kind of brought up the Southern wing, which wasn't progressive in all respects, Huey Newton, got assassinated. I mean, Huey Long got assassinated. So that third party challenge, there actually was something called the Union Party, and it got 2% of the vote. But that was a remnant of what that party had been, or what that movement had been. So I went on that little historical tangent. I can't remember what the original question was, but
about independent socialism versus
democratic
85
years. So that's why ever since then, most people that call themselves progressives, even socialists, have been entering the Democratic Party. After the communists did, the Socialist Party did. They called it realignment. They were going to kick the Dixiecrats out of the Democratic Party, let them go to the Republican Party, and then they thought they would have a sort of social democratic labor party like the Labor Party in Britain or the Social Democrats in Germany. But what happened in the absence of an independent left is that the Democrats said, well, we got labor, blacks, women, environmentalist peace activists in our back pocket. Now we can go get business money more than ever. And they moved to the right. And that's been the dynamic since, really since the early 70s. And, you know, after all this historical experience, you'd think people would draw the right conclusion. The left needs to act and speak for itself to the people, rather than try to do it through the Democratic Party. I like Bernie Sanders. The example I get, or the lesson I get from his runs for president, is not that he advanced the progressive platform. None of the things he talked about have been enacted. The Democratic Party has buried them. But he ran 14 elections as an independent and won. Mayor of Burlington, U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate. Then he goes into the Democratic Party, and what happens? Corporate establishment closes ranks against him to make sure he doesn't win the primary. I mean, it was really clear this time. I mean, all of them, all the other candidates, and behind the scenes, the Barack Obamas and whatnot, they all got anybody but Bernie, and anybody was Biden. The lesson there is take your program to the people and you can get elected. Go into the Democratic Party, you get lost. Since the communists and the socialists and all the progressive movements for the last 85 years went into the Democratic Party, we have not had an independent left as a major force. It's time to draw the historical lesson.
Some might say, you know, just speculatively, that maybe that was intentional. Imagine that. It's how they defang us. There's a conversation I had on Twitter today. If you are a leftist, and Howie and I have said this umpteen quintillion times, gonna say it umpteen quintillion times. If you are a leftist, stand on the fact that you are a leftist. Our opposition does not water down their message for anyone's comfort. Why are we doing it? Why are we giving ground because we don't want to offend by what we believe? And then have, you know, you've got the Democrats co-opting ideas that came from us, gutting them, diluting them, and as Howie always says, pulled off the table. That's our stuff. Stand on it. I'm not going to back off saying that I am a socialist when that is what I am. That is what I believe. And someone was in the chat saying, why aren't you're fracturing the left because you're not helping the Democratic Party. We're not supposed to help the Democratic Party. I mean, come on. You want to cite these progressives? What has the working person accomplished? Why are we fighting the same battle now that we've been fighting with them for 50 years?
Well, somebody in the chat says, we've elected more representatives. Maybe that's referring to some of those DSA Democrats. We'll take allies where we can get them. Not really. Where did AOC get the Green New Deal from? The New York Green Party. She got it from a candidate who now is a Democrat, but ran as a Green for City Council in New York, whose campaign manager, V.G. Ramos, was AOC's campaign manager. AOC starts running on the Green New Deal. And there's a coalition in New York that these progressive Democrats have to, say, advance the Green New Deal. They won't let the Green Party into their coalition because they're more committed to the Democratic Party than they are to the Green New Deal. So, I have no problem working with progressive Democrats on issues where we agree. Medicare for all, Green New Deal. How about leave Venezuela alone? That's where these DSA Democrats are kind of quiet, the ones in elected office. We're willing to work with them on issues. We're the ones being excluded, kept off the platforms, kept out of their media. And so it's a two-way street. And as far as we're concerned, we're ready to walk down it with them.
And when you deal with us and you work with us, you will know who you're working with because we're very explicit about who we are and what we stand on. And we're not backing down from that. Hey, Daniel. Daniel Sadat, this one is for you, Howie. What do you think about other voting systems and how they will affect smaller parties or freedom of choice?
Well, I think we need proportional voting systems. And given the political culture of the United States, I think ranked choice voting is what we need to push to get proportional representation, as I was saying earlier, in legislative bodies by having a ranked choice vote in multi-member districts. And then we also need it for the executive offices, which are inherently single seats. And I think what it will do for smaller parties, it will enable people to support us and vote for us without worrying about helping their worst enemy, the so-called spoiler problem. I mean, people blame us and some Greens want to deny it, but the truth is we can have a split between the center and the left, the Democrats and the Greens, and have the right-wing Republican get elected, even though they're probably the least popular candidate. That's a terrible election system. That's what we have. Plurality winner from single-member districts. And until we change that, we're always, as Greens, independent left, we're going to be up against that problem. So I think, that's really an important issue for us to push. And like I said, it's gaining momentum. Ranked choice voting now in 38 cities and 2 states. And a lot of campaigns going on across the country to expand that. And as far as freedom of choice, yeah, you're free to vote for what you want without worrying about it maybe helping the person that you support the least. So that's such a key issue. And people say, well, top issues are jobs, economy, healthcare, climate. That's true, but I just got to look at the advances ranked choice voting has made. And when people think about it and it's on the ballot, they vote for it. So I think that's an issue we can advance. Even if you're not going to get 500,000 people in the Washington Mall demanding it, that would be good. To abolish the Electoral College and go for a ranked choice national popular vote. When we get to that point, we'll be somewhere. But in the meantime, we can get this passed in more and more communities and states. And that creates some momentum for change at the national level. And there is a bill in Congress for proportional representation using ranked choice voting. It's called the Fair Representation Act. It's only got a few sponsors, but if you want to lobby your progressive Democrats, bug them to sign on to that bill.
And we just got the cane from the boss in the chat. So what final thoughts do you have on this holiday week, Howie?
We did a lot of talking. We didn't get as many questions as usual. We had a lot to say. But I'm trying to read some of the later comments. You know, one thing, I'm writing an article. Hopefully I'll get it done in a day or two. And I'm calling out the progressives because I think they almost reelected Donald Trump by giving, you know, once the establishment Democrats closed ranks to defeat Bernie Sanders, the progressives, including Bernie Sanders, gave unconditional support to Biden, who had no progressive message to motivate the base, to win back Obama to Trump voters, or to motivate non-voters. And it was like, as I was saying earlier, it was like Clinton's run in 2016. Same thing. And the result was very similar. You looked at the polls and Trump's approval ratings were in the tank. It should have been a landslide. I remember Ralph Nader writing back in September, why is Biden only winning by single digits? He should be winning by 30 points against a Republican government that was lying to people, that had failed on COVID, allowed the economy to collapse, was obviously corrupt, lining their own pockets, and was insulting half the population with their scapegoating. How could the Democrats only be winning by single digits? Because they didn't have a progressive message. And, you know, these so-called public intellectuals on the left who said, oh, we got to back, I heard professors, you know, tell me to my face, we got to back the neoliberals. They hated neoliberals to defeat the neo-fascists. And I told them, you may defeat Trump, but you're not going to defeat Trumpism, because there's a political and material basis to that. And Trump is a symptom of it. He's not the cause. So here we are. The neoliberals are in charge. They're promoting austerity and aggression abroad. And the far right is going to mobilize around that with their racist scapegoating and conspiracy fantasies. We need an independent left that speaks with its own voice, with its own platform, its own party. And we got to beat both the Democratic neoliberals and the Republican neo-fascists. And I hope people will figure that out. You know, I think as progressives get disappointed with Biden, hopefully the Greens will be in a position to bring them in. And we can, you know, the thing I've been saying this whole campaign and since is that the Greens, we elected 22 people at least in 2020. We have 110 elected officials in the country. And that's pretty good. It's more than any third party on the left since the heyday of the Socialist Party. But it's not enough. We should be electing thousands. And that's the foundation to local office. And that's the foundation for electing people to state legislatures and Congress. And when we do that, then we can compete for national power. And, you know, I think that's on our agenda. And all these folks that think they're going to take over the Democratic Party, you've had 85 years. Let's try something else.
Mic drop. Howie dropped the mic. Aside from saying that this man needs to be declared a national treasure, what I want to leave y'all with, we had a magnificent conjunction of Saturn and, Lord have mercy, I should know it. Two planets, Saturn and Jupiter, made a big conjunction, a big, you know, once every 100-something years conjunction yesterday. So blessed solstice to all of you. I am wishing all of y'all with the return of the light, I am wishing you joy. I am wishing you comfort. I am wishing you good health for yourselves and everybody that you know and love. I am wishing you clarity in this coming year because we're going to need it. I am wishing on your ability to call up your courage whenever you need it because we're going to need it and you're already there. So I'm wishing y'all, whatever your belief is, I am wishing you the warmest of holiday seasons with everything that's going on. And y'all take care of each other, take care of yourselves. They're talking about mutations with COVID-19. Don't get scared. Viruses mutate. Keep up your precautions. Keep doing what you're doing internally to build yourselves up. Keep your mental health up because that is absolutely crucial. And just understand that every last one of you is needed. Not just for this political stuff, not just for the organizing, but simply because you exist. We need you and we want you to be okay. And that's what I got.